We heard from Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, and Von Miller yesterday, and it's time to dig into their comments for meaningful takeaways today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino from the Draft Network, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Happy Thursday to you, and thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, or if you're joining us on the YouTube channel, your first watch every day. Speaking of the YouTube channel, we're going to be live on Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern time. I'm going to have a guest with me, and we're going to do some live Buffalo Bills mock draft simulations, and we're just going to have a very organic conversation about the Bills and the 2022 NFL Draft. So don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel. Turn on the notification bell. That way you'll be informed when we go live, and we will tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So set an alarm on your phone. Come join us and have some fun doing some mock drafts and some just organic Bills draft conversation. Today on the podcast, we are going to reflect on the comments made by Brandon Beane, Sean McDermott, Josh Allen, and Von Miller. They all met with the media on Wednesday afternoon. It was the second day of voluntary workouts for the team. So we got some updates there. And it's a week before the draft. And so there were some fun comments to dig into to see what we can learn in terms of clues about what maybe some of the intentions are for next week. So let's start with Brandon Beane and figure out if we can determine if he said anything meaningful. These were my most notable takeaways from listening to, I guess, almost 2 hours of press conferences on Wednesday afternoon. So Brandon Beane's press conference started with some general comments about the status of the roster, how it's positioned going into the draft, and then, of course, the defensive back question. And so Brandon Beane said, we don't feel like, man, we've got to get this or that. All right, so I know that that's a very vague opening comment. But Brandon Beane does try to position himself going into the draft without a glaring need. That way they don't feel like they have to pick a specific position. Then when he was asked about the need for a defensive back, he responded with a very generic answer. And Beane will do that sometimes. Other times he's very candid and honest, but he was very much going into the bag of blanket statements. He said, we're looking for depth in a lot of spots. That one too. If we draft a corner, we have to ask ourselves, how does he compare to our depth? And it's interesting because he said something very similar to this last year. And that was after the draft when, again, everybody was wanting a cornerback to be drafted higher. And they didn't pick one until Rashad Wildgoose in the 6th round. And the comment that he made about not picking a cornerback earlier was, if we picked a corner in the 2nd or 3rd round and they couldn't beat out Dane Jackson, then we would have to answer questions about our higher pick not being able to jump our 7th round pick that wound up being a meaningful depth player and, of course, starter down the stretch. And so the Bills definitely ask themselves the question, how does this player measure up with the players we already have? And if they don't feel like it's going to elevate the depth chart, they won't pick them. I think that's something that we've learned throughout Brandon Beane's tendencies and things that he said about the draft going in and coming out of it. Regarding the status of the cornerback position, and if he was comfortable with the status of the cornerback position, Brandon Beane said, I'm not comfortable at a lot of positions. He did say that he was comfortable at quarterback, which I hope he would, given he's got Josh Allen, Case Keenum, and Matt Barkley. He said, we've looked at some veteran cornerbacks. We have a lot of confidence in Dane Jackson. I'm a Dane Jackson fan. He's played 2 seasons now. We build our defense starting up front. If you are strong up front, you can help your back end. Our purpose in free agency was to focus up front. We felt like that was the best path. Now, we know that the Bills prioritize pass rush over coverage. That's very clear with what they say and how their actions back that up. They believe they can hide deficiencies in the secondary with a strong pass rush. And you better believe that this is the pass rush group that should be the best the Bills have ever had under Beane and McDermott. But I do go back to just kind of those opening few questions, a lot of defensive back, a lot of needs types questions, where it was very much kind of sweep it under the rug, talk generically, and not admit major concern at cornerback. And when we get into Sean McDermott's comments about it, it's very much the same thing. So I don't know if they're being intentional with the way they're responding to that, because he was a lot more direct about other questions and other questions about specific position groups. So we'll see, but I get the feeling that they were being very cautious to not come out and say, yeah, we got to get some cornerback help. On first-round grades, this always fascinates me. He was asked how many first-round grades they have. And Beane came out and said, I don't have 32 players graded in the first round. Nobody ever does. It's usually around 15 to 20, somewhere in that range. Now, there's 32 first-round picks, but no team out there is going to have 32 first-round grades. No draft class is ever going to supply that. I have around 20. Most teams will have 15 to 20. So he said, I don't have 32 first-round grades. I'm hopeful we will still be able to draft a player at 25 that we have a first-round grade on. We picked 30 last year, and we didn't have 30 first-round grades, but we did have a first-round grade on Greg Rousseau. If numbers are getting thin, I'll be looking both ways. And what he means by that is if the numbers are getting thin, they only have a couple of first-round grades left on their board, they will either think about moving up to make sure they get one of those last remaining first-round grades, or they'll go the other way and say, hey, we're not sure that these players are going to get there. We'd rather stockpile and have more ammunition for the middle rounds or day 2. And I know that that's not revolutionary, right? That's nothing groundbreaking that he said, but to me, it's worthwhile to mention that he's acknowledged they don't have enough players to fill out the entire first round and that they're willing to make a move in either direction. On the types of players the Bills look for, and I put this in there because I've talked a lot about the lack of players the Bills draft from the SEC, and I've speculated a lot about why they don't pick players from the SEC. And I think his comments here really line up with my speculation. He said, we want to draft guys that refuse to lose, guys that have been doubted, guys that will find a way to get on the roster and help the team. The part that stands out to me is guys that have been doubted. Again, the SEC, it's all 5-star recruits. It's players that have been told how great they are at playing football their entire life. Brandon Beane doesn't want that. He wants talented players that have been doubted, that have a chip on their shoulders. And I think that's honestly why you see the Bills kind of stay away from the SEC, the conference that brands itself as it just means more. Now, I fully recognize the best players, the best coaches, the best teams, the best talent in college football is in the SEC. But I also understand the position that the Bills take when considering prospects. On Jordan Poyer, Brandon Beane said, I'm a big fan of Jordan. I know what's been reported. I don't talk about contracts in the media. I have nothing but glowing things to say about Jordan and his family. That's as deep as I will get into it. He's got a great agent in Drew Rosenhaus. We've always had a great relationship. There's no conflict or anything like that. I want Jordan here. Business gets in the way sometimes. I respect that. There are other guys here that want to be paid too. Jordan's is public, but there are other guys who have inquired. I want to pay them all, the ones who have earned it. You can't pay them all, and that's hard. I'm a people person, but I have a job to do. So I feel somewhat encouraged by the way Beane responded to that. Said he's a big Jordan fan, fully aware of the situation, wants him to be there. Let's let it play out. On a running back in the first round, Brandon Beane said, we've had guys on our board as first-round grades at running back, meaning since he's been the GM of the Bills, they've had running backs graded in the first round. It does sometimes come down to position value. If there is a player that I think is dynamic enough as a running back that can add an element to our offense, we would take him. Would have to be dynamic enough as a running back to pick him over players at positions of higher value. So a couple of things here. We know that the Bills have graded running backs in the first round. Brandon Beane has said they would draft a running back in the first round, but he also does acknowledge here on 2 occasions that running back would have to be at a certain level because he does consider positional value. And when you think about the actions of Brandon Beane since 2017, he's picked 2 running backs in the third round and signed the likes of TJ Yeldon and Matt Breida. So I do think that there is a positional value component that the Bills do subscribe to. There's also a part of me that feels like this team is willing and somewhat destined to pick a running back in the first round. On it being a Super Bowl or bust season, and I love this answer from Brandon Beane. He said, this isn't a one-year Super Bowl or bust type of season. He said, no move the Bills made this year is just for this upcoming season. He said he's rarely ever going to say, let's push all the chips onto the table and say it's now or never in a one-season window. And that is exactly the right mindset to have because no team in the history of the NFL has ever been in a Super Bowl or bust season. That is not a real statement. It can't be binary. Your season can't be, we had a good year because we won the Super Bowl, or we didn't have a good year because we didn't win the Super Bowl. One team out of 32 wins the Super Bowl. 31 teams go home upset because they either lost in the playoffs or they weren't good enough to make the playoffs. We have to acknowledge there is a level of randomness that exists with football. There are hard to control variables that there's nothing you can do about it. So no season can ever be Super Bowl or bust in a single elimination playoff tournament. It's a ridiculous comment that I see out there. So no, the 2022 Buffalo Bills are not in a Super Bowl or bust season, just like no team ever has been in that type of a predicament. I don't believe in that at all. On Gabe Davis and the wide receiver position in the draft, tell you what, Brandon Beane loves him some Gabe Davis. He said, Gabe is a stud, and I mean that in all facets. His habits. He is serious about football. He is so driven, and it's not fake. I'll go to war with Gabe Davis any day. The dude loves Gabe Davis. And it sounds like, anytime you hear anybody from the organization talk about Gabe Davis, they rave about the guy. So I can't wait to see him in year 3 of his career. And then regarding the wide receiver talent, Brandon Beane said there's going to be wide receiver talent in every draft, given how the game has changed and the evolution of youth 7-on-7s. And so I don't know if you guys remember, like back in the day, or 20, 25, 30 years ago, when teams used to pick a wide receiver in the first round or second round, it was like they're not going to do anything for 2 or 3 years. Happened with Eric Moulds, right? Eric Moulds was drafted. He was very quiet his first couple of seasons, made a few splashy plays, made a big-time impact as a kick returner, but it took a few years for him to really develop as a wide receiver in the NFL, and the next thing you know, this guy has basically 10,000 receiving yards for his career. And that was kind of the arc that so many receivers followed. Now, nowadays, it ain't like that. You go to high school games, they're throwing a football. That wasn't always the case. You used to go to high school games. I used to watch my brother play in the late 90s. It was run the ball. Run it, run it, run it. They threw the ball like 3 times a game. So the evolution of how the game is changing is positioning wide receiver talent to enter the NFL and step in and make an impact. And so Brandon Beane's pretty much saying, look, every year there's going to be really talented wide receivers at our disposal to pick from in the draft. And then the last thing that I took away from Brandon Beane's nearly 45-minute session was his famous comment that he's made every year about how the last game that you play in, if you make the playoffs, will tell you what you need to know about your flaws. And he said, coming out of that Kansas City loss, that they had to get better up front and get the opposing quarterback on the ground, and they wanted to be more consistent with the pass rush. Well, I think signing Von Miller to a 6-year, $120 million deal is a clear indicator that that's exactly what he thought the issues were, not to mention moving on from Jerry Hughes and Mario Addison, and then, of course, signing the likes of Tim Settle and Daquan Jones and Shaq Lawson and Jordan Phillips and all the moves that they made on the defensive line. It's very clear that the emphasis was placed on the defensive line and that they feel like that's what they need to get him over the hump. Now I'm interested to see if they work on the back end of the defense in this coming draft. Whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. You can shop high classic, quality diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces. Looking for fine jewelry but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Celebrating the special women in your life? On BlueNile.com, you can easily navigate thousands of fine jewelry options at every price point. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day. Use code Locked On. That's code Locked On, plus every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in discreet packaging that they won't give away what's inside. You can shop stress-free and find your forever piece. Go to BlueNile.com today. All right, let's get to Sean McDermott's comments. Sean McDermott on Jordan Poyer, he said, I've been in contact with Jordan. That's part of the NFL and how things work this time of year with some business going on. I love Jordan and his family. He's been a big part of what we've done here to this point. I will leave it lie where it is right now. So he acknowledged the situation. He's been speaking to him, part of the NFL. And just like Brandon Beane, he said, I love Jordan and his family. On the need at cornerback, Sean McDermott said, we're always looking to improve our team in any way that we can. Take it one step at a time. We have a lot of confidence in the corners that we have. Dane's played a lot of football, and Trey is working hard. Maybe it is that simple, guys and girls. Maybe the Bills feel comfortable with Trey White and Dane Jackson. And they're like, what are you so concerned about? Maybe they need a primary backup. Or maybe they're just trying to sweep it under the rug because they plan on double dipping early in the draft at corner. On Trey White, Sean McDermott said we have to be realistic with him coming off the injury and what to expect in the first season back. He's here every day busting his tail and working hard to control what he can control. We'll see. We'll see how that goes, but it's definitely an acknowledgement from Coach McDermott that if you think Trey's going to step in as soon as he's cleared and be Trey White, that's probably an unfair expectation, which is why they need to pick a couple of corners early in the draft. We'll see. On Josh Allen and his stardom and how he's kind of become one of the faces of the NFL, Sean McDermott said he's handled it in stride. He's mature enough to handle it the right way. And he kind of talked about how Josh Allen kind of gradually becoming a star was really good for him because it's allowed him to mature as opposed to this guy coming in and catching lightning in a bottle from the day he walks into the NFL. And so that gradual stardom positioned Josh to be able to handle it the right way. On gaining speed on offense, Sean McDermott said there's no substitutes for speed. We do have speed on offense and our team, but we don't ever turn speed down. Kind of a generic answer, but certainly vocalizing his appreciation for speed. Then on the DB class, the corners, the safeties in general in the 2022 NFL draft and his involvement with the scouting process, McDermott said that his involvement is significant as much as any coach in the NFL. He recognized that there's some depth available in the secondary in this draft. And then he said something that really resonated with me. He said there's some players that you'd like to put the two guys together in terms of skill set. And I feel you, Sean. You probably loved Trent McDuffie and you said, I like this football player, but he's got short arms. You know, maybe you can take another player's length with Trent McDuffie's coverage ability and mindset, and you got a really good player. But I think he's exactly right. It feels like, except for except for Sauce Gardner, every single one of these top corners, there's just one thing about him that rubs you the wrong way. And I would agree. I wish I could combine some of these guys and make them one player, but you don't get to do that. Let's get to Josh Allen's comments. And these were pretty interesting. He said, regarding the new offensive coordinator, he said, I'm asking as many questions as possible to try to get on the same page. Dable is not Dorsey, and Dorsey is not Dable. He'll have his own wrinkles on the offense. Things will switch up, and things we are going to keep the same. So it's an acknowledgement of some carryover, but also something that we've been talking a lot about on the podcast, and that Ken Dorsey is going to make this offense his own. He's not just going to copy-paste Brian Dable. This is this man's chance, right, to run an NFL offense and position himself for the next step in his coaching career. It's going to be a little different, and it's not just the same thing. Josh even went as far as to say, look, it's even something as simple as a different voice in my headset and what that's like in the rhythm of a game. So there is an adjustment here. It's not just pick up the ball and run with it. Now, there's some carryover, and all that's very good, but I think there's going to be wrinkles. There's going to be things stylistically different about this scheme. On Stephon Diggs getting a new deal, he said he's super excited. Happy I get to keep my guy. A lot of different ways that could have played out. Thankful he likes Buffalo enough to stay and call this place home. He's the corner piece of our wide receiver core, and he's one of, if not the best wide receiver in the game, and he opens up so much for the offense. Really appreciate what he said there at the end about how it opens things up for the offense, because Gabriel Davis, the reason he was able to have the game that he did against the Chiefs in the playoffs is because of the attention that Stephon Diggs draws. And not only is Steph Diggs one of the most productive players in the league, but he opens up production for everyone else. And I was appreciative of Josh to kind of bring that to the forefront. On Von Miller being part of the team, he said, I worked my tail off to get him here. Thankful he's here. He's been a great player for a long time and shows no signs of slowing down. A guy you have to account for if you're an opposing offense. He should force quarterbacks to get the ball out quicker, which is big for the defense to have a guy like that. Josh Allen's stance on showing up for voluntary workouts. He said, I do not feel like I have to be here, but I want to be here. I love being here and being with the guys. I love training camp and going away for 2 weeks and being with the guys and staying up late and playing video games, watching movies, and playing cards. The dynamics of Buffalo as a city help the team bond because everyone's always together. And I think that's significant. I mean, when you talk about building a team and having the right leadership for it in the dynamics of your region, it makes me thankful that Sean McDermott is the way that he is, because I think he's helped shift the inevitable issues that come with the team being in Buffalo, the challenges that come with the team being in Western New York that plagued them for years coming out of the Super Bowl era when free agency kicked in. Became a different ball game. And when you have a leader like Sean McDermott that preaches love and caring about your teammates and all that type of stuff, it's going to be the right messaging for a town like Buffalo. So you just have to love this Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane, Josh Allen infrastructure that's in place because it's all the right stuff for Buffalo. On losing Cole Beasley, John Feliciano, and Darrell Williams, he said those guys helped change the culture of the organization. They will be missed. He developed deep relationships with them. He said Cole was his safety valve over the last few years. Said, I freaking love those guys. Sad to see them go. But going into year 5, I am starting to see and feel the business side of the game. On Josh Allen's growth and what he's working on this offseason, and this makes me really happy, because you guys know I've been talking about this. He said we have to get over the hump in the playoffs. We have to come out stronger earlier in the season and earlier in games. And he talked about how he didn't develop comfort until later in the season. He wants to establish that sooner, which might be challenging giving a new offensive coordinator, a lot of new coaches in the offense in general, and new players in the offense, where there's a lot more turnover from a coaching and personnel perspective than ever before. And now Josh is preaching starting stronger, both in games and in the season. I think we watched the 2021 season. We can all recognize that the team didn't hit its stride until, later on. That's why they were so uneven early on. Pittsburgh game, Jacksonville game. They need to find their stride sooner, and it's going to be more challenging to do it. But I do agree with Josh in that they got to get that figured out. Then he went and started to talk about run after catch, yards after catch. You guys know I've been talking about this for a couple of years. The Bills have been towards the bottom of the league. Last year, the worst in the league in yards after catch per reception. He said he has to be on time with the football and set guys up for run after catch on the offense. He said run after catch wasn't very high. You're not wrong, Josh. It was dead last. He said that's on me putting the ball where it needs to be to put our guys in position to produce after the catch. Ball placement is a big part of what he's working on this offseason. I agree. I fully agree with you, Josh. I would love to see more yards after catch in this offense. To me, it's just low-hanging fruit for how this entire unit can take a step moving forward. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. Go Mets. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. Let's finish up with the comments made by Von Miller. And let me just say, he's had 2 press conferences now, his introductory press conference and then this one. Von is phenomenal. He's a guy that I will make sure that I listen to everything he says. Now, I always listen to McDermott every time. I listen to Beane every time. I listen to the assistant coaches, the coordinators every time. I listen to Josh every time. Von Miller is going to be on that list because he is a can't-miss guy. Emmanuel Sanders was like that for me last year, where I wanted to hear everything he had to say. Von's going to be appointment viewing for me when he gets to the podium. Let's recap what he said. He said on the team in general, because, it's his first couple of days with the guys, he said the collection of guys and personalities is unlike anything I've ever been around. Everyone is great. It has a college vibe at the facility. And he said, when we are at the facility, it's a dream. Now, he did admit that he's still adjusting to Western New York and, the wind and the cold and all that type of stuff. But you could tell he is in love with being at the facility and being around the guys and being part of the Buffalo Bills team. On Stephon Diggs, he said he's a big part of why he's there. He convinced him that it was a great city and a great place, and he called Steph Diggs an international superstar. So shout out Steph Diggs, that even with his contract status, something that he wasn't satisfied with, still going out and recruiting guys to come be part of the Buffalo Bills. On if the team is facing a hangover from the way the season last year ended, he said, the guys let it go. We have a great team. We're ready to go. This is one of the most talented teams I've ever been on. Not just talking about the stars, I'm talking about the base foundational players as well. We got to let it go and push past it. The entire AFC has gotten better. We can't get hung up on what happened against Kansas City. Bingo. On the defensive line rotation that has typically been in place under Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, Von Miller said, I like to be on the field. I can't make plays when I'm not on the field. I got to be in the game to affect the game. I'm all for rotation, but when it's crunch time, I have to be out there. All I've ever wanted to do is play football. How do you not love this guy, man? Last year, Mario Addison's like, yeah, I'm at the point in my career where, I want to play less and be fresh to be able to play, more of the meaningful snaps. He was like excited about the young players being there and not having to play as much. Von Miller's like, I got to be in the game. And when you look at Von Miller's career, he's typically a guy that's played like 80% of the snaps every single year. So how many snaps he plays per game is going to be fascinating to me. And Von even took it to the point where he said, hey, if there's 80 defensive snaps in a game and I'm only out there for 40 of them, then I'm missing a lot of opportunities to make plays. And then he kind of brought that number up to 60. He said, if I'm out there for 60, that's a lot better. And then he talked about when he gets pulled off, he only wants to be out for 1 or 2 plays, and that's it. Love it. On fitting in with the Bills, he said, it's my 12th year. I played in all types of defenses. I'm a coach's dream. I know football. I know defenses. I'm a team guy. I know how to work with all types of personalities and age groups. I'm 33. We have guys here that are 22 and 21. I can relate to all people, coaches, everybody. The main goal is to win the Super Bowl, and whatever my role is, I am going to do it 100% to get the job done. You got to love that. I was reminded when I heard him say that, the first thing that came to mind for me was listening to Steve Smith, the wide receiver from the Carolina Panthers, when they drafted Cam Newton. And I remember listening to a radio interview with Steve Smith, and the host had asked him about his relationship with Cam Newton. And Steve Smith's like, we get our work done, but he's like, I'm 30-something years old. This is a 20-something-year-old kid. So we don't have anything in common. Meanwhile, Von Miller's like, I'm a coach's dream. I can get along with anybody. The main goal here is to win the Super Bowl. So whatever I got to do, I'm going to do it. You just kind of pick up just different things about how people are wired. Makes me really love Von Miller even more. On Tremaine Edmonds, he said, I've been a big fan of him. He's a big, tall linebacker. He's great in the pass. He's great at stopping the run. He's a freak linebacker that I'm looking forward to playing with. On the young defensive ends on the roster, he said, I am an open book, and I'm going to force some of my chapters on them. Have to pay the information forward. It's my way of giving back to the game. And then he referenced DeMarcus Ware when he came over from the Cowboys to the Broncos and what it meant for Von Miller as a young player in his development. And then the last thing on his age, I love this answer. He said, I don't feel 33. Mentally, I don't feel old. I keep my mind positive. I don't look 33. I don't feel 33. I make it a point to be healthy and take care of my body. It's a 6-year contract, and I'm trying to play the whole thing out. My intention is to play the whole thing. My mindset is different. Man, do I love this guy. Are you kidding me? Just a completely different vibe than a lot of players that you hear. He talked about Bruce Smith playing till he was 40. Talked about Tom Brady playing into his 40s. So while it may feel like a 3-year deal, if Von's going to be Von and keep playing and leading and doing all the stuff that he's done throughout his career, sign me up for all the Von Miller I can get. All right, folks, hope you enjoyed this. I certainly did. I always love press conferences. I've said this before in the podcast. I listen to a lot of press conferences. Other teams, I love it. I love seeing what guys will say and if people are going to be generic and boring or if they're going to be candid. If they're going to be generic and boring, I cut that off. But if they're interesting, I'll stay and listen, and I learn a lot through press conferences. And so from time to time, we will do this type of thing where we'll dissect press conferences and talk about the meaningful takeaways. And hopefully you found that to be the case here today. Like I said, tomorrow, or I guess tonight, Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, live on the Locked On Bills YouTube channel, we're doing the mock drafts. I'll have a guest. It'll be fun. It'll be very much just a couple of guys being dudes, talking ball, talking Bills, doing mock draft simulations. So don't miss it. Make sure you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and I look forward to catching up with you again tonight or tomorrow.